Hey y'all, thanks so much for jumping in with us today. Now, these videos are designed to help us grow deeper in the conversations that we started last week at our gathering. Now, if you weren't able to make it to the gathering, you can watch them online at Crosspoint College's YouTube channel. Now, the conversation that we are continuing is about wasting it all on God. Now, wasting things is usually not a good idea, but there are times when not only is it a good thing, but we celebrate it. Like when a player leaves it all out on the field, or when somebody exhausts all of their resources to help make a way for someone else. When I think about people who do this, I think about George Mueller. George Mueller was a waste it all on God kind of guy. He lived from 1805 to 1898, and George was a man who was so passionate about the gospel being lived out that he spent the majority of his life helping those who were in need and couldn't help themselves. Now, orphans were his primary means of outreach. During his lifetime, he cared for 10,000 orphans and provided education for them as well. His schooling actually raised the educational status of orphan children past what at the time was commonly accepted in social standards. To say it plainly, the orphans in Mueller's schools became smarter than the kids who were in the ritzy schools. And it wasn't just one school either. Mueller established 117 schools, which offered Christian education to more than 120,000 students. That's incredible. And it takes trust and faith to see something like that through. And Mueller's faith was not lacking. Jesus teaches us about what happens when our faith is lacking. In Matthew 13, Jesus and his disciples are in his hometown when he starts to talk to them about what happens when you're in your hometown. Let me read it for us. Then the people began to say, as soon as Jesus had finished teaching, "Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't this Mary's son? And aren't his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? Aren't all of his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all of these things?" And they took offense at Jesus. But Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own town and in his own home." Now get this. And he did not do any miracles there because of their lack of faith. It's because of their lack of faith that he didn't move, he didn't do miracles. Now, I'm convinced that there are things in our lives that God is longing to do that if we just had a little faith, maybe a mustard seed size, that they would be accomplished. There's a story in George Mueller's life that reminds me of the true power of God and what it means for that power to be partnered with our faith. Once while crossing the Atlantic in August 1877, Mueller's ship ran into a thick fog. He explained to the captain that he needed to be in Quebec by the following afternoon, but Captain Joseph Dutton said that he was slowing the ship down for the safety of the staff and Mueller, that Mueller's appointment would have to be missed. Now, rather than get angry or frustrated, Mueller asked the captain if there was a chart room that he could use to pray for the fog to lift. Reluctantly, the captain showed him to the chart room, and all the while, claiming that it was a massive waste of time. After Mueller prayed a very simple prayer, the captain started to pray too. But Mueller stopped him in the middle of his prayer, partly because of the captain's unbelief, but mainly because he believed that prayer had already been answered. Mueller said, "Captain, I have known my Lord for more than 50 years, and there is not one instance that I have failed to have an audience with the king. Get up, Captain, for you will find that the fog has gone." When the two men went back to the bridge, they found that the fog had lifted, and Mueller was able to keep his appointment. And the captain, he became a Christian shortly afterwards. As a matter of fact, they began referring to the captain, formerly known as Joseph Dutton, as Holy Joe because of his commitment to God. Okay. This story is incredible. It shows the faith of a man to believe that God has called him to something and that God will provide for him to accomplish it. All right, I've got time. I got time for one more story. Okay. So one of the greatest logistical challenges that happens when running an orphanage is that there's always more mouths to feed. On one particular day during the beginning of Mueller's orphanage, there were 300 children dressed and ready for school. But to the dismay of the staff, they had no food or milk to feed the kids before school would start. The staff came to Mueller in horror, knowing that 300 hungry kids would not go over well. But when you compound this with the reality that they felt the burden to care for these children, who otherwise had no one to care for them, the day was beginning to look grim. But Mueller took a deep breath as he received the news and asked everyone to sit at the tables. He asked for the silverware and the plates to be brought out. And as everyone sat down, Mueller began to bless the food that God would provide. No sooner than he had finished praying, there was a knock at the door. Lo and behold, it was the baker. And the baker said, "Mr. Mueller, I was up all night. I can't explain it, but I just knew that you would need bread this morning. So I baked through the evening, through the night, and through the morning, and brought you loaves for your orphanage." God is great, and he heard the prayers of Mueller and the 300 orphans that morning. But God wasn't done yet. Just a few moments later, there was another knock at the door. It was the milkman. His truck had broken down, and he came to the door and asked Mr. Mueller if he had need for milk, because all of the milk that he had in his truck would spoil before he reached his next destination. There was just enough bread and milk for every orphan in the house. Now, one thing that amazes me about Mueller is his heart to serve others. But maybe even more so is the faith that he has to believe that God will give exactly what he needs to carry out what God called him to. This can only come from relational equity built with time with God. Mueller did not wait to be 40 or 50 years old to seek God and to build a life with him. He started when he was young. And because of that, he built a relationship with God that he could stand boldly and firmly on. He wasted his life pouring every drop out on having faith in God. Now, as we face the trials of today, whether fog over the next season of our life or living in a season that feels scarce, maybe what we need more than anything else is to pray, to build on that friendship and love for God, to humbly ask him to move. Then, only then, can we see God make a way and lead us where we otherwise would have no courage to go. Now, tonight in our groups, let's talk about faith and praying bigger than our current circumstances. Remembering, just like Mueller exemplified, our God is not defined by our circumstances, but he can define and redefine our circumstances in a moment if we will partner with faith.